My legs were heavy every morning, not sore, not tired from exercise, heavy in a way that felt permanent, like something was wrong inside the tissue itself, something that no amount of stretching or rest was going to fix. I'm 83 years old. I've been paying close attention to what this body does and doesn't do for decades, and for years I told myself the heaviness was just age, just circulation slowing down the way circulation does, just the cost of getting older. I was wrong. And the day I found out why, everything changed. Because it wasn't age. It was one specific habit I had been doing every single morning for years without ever questioning it. A habit most people over 65 do without thinking. A habit that, as it turns out, actively constricts the small blood vessels that feed your legs and feet. Every morning, before you've eaten a single thing. I stopped that habit. My legs started coming back. I'm not going to tell you this was magic. I'm going to tell you what actually happens inside your blood vessels in the first hour after you wake up. Because once you understand the mechanism, you'll understand why what you do in those first 60 minutes either protects your circulation or damages it, day after day, year after year. Stay with me, because the habit I'm about to name is sitting in most people's morning routine right now, and nobody has connected it to the burning, the heaviness, the numbness in their feet and legs. That connection is what this video is about. Before I get there, tell me something. Do your feet burn at night? Does the numbness in your toes show up before bed and get worse by morning? Drop yes or no in the comments right now. Because what I'm about to explain is the reason that pattern exists, and it is not random. Let me start with what's actually happening in your legs. After 60, when blood sugar has been running high, even slightly high, even what your doctor calls borderline, something happens to the small vessels that deliver blood to your feet and lower legs. Researchers call it peripheral microvascular damage. The tiny capillaries that reach into your nerve tissue get stiff, the walls thicken, the opening narrows. Less blood gets through, less oxygen. Less of the nutrients those nerves need to keep firing correctly. And then the nerves themselves start to suffer. The protective coating around them, the myelin, begins to thin out. The signals from your feet back to your brain get slower, weaker, distorted. Your feet feel like they belong to someone else. They burn when nothing is touching them. They go numb when you've been sitting still. They tingle at night for no reason you can explain. That is peripheral neuropathy. And it is not just discomfort. It is a warning sign that the tissue in your lower legs is not getting what it needs. Now here's what your doctor probably has not had time to explain to you. And I say this not as a criticism. Your doctor has 8 minutes with you and a list of 10 things to cover. This falls off the list. The damage in those small vessels is not just from the sugar itself. It is from what the sugar does to the vessel walls over time. Research has consistently linked elevated blood glucose to a process called glycation, where sugar molecules attach to proteins in your blood vessel walls and make them rigid and sticky. The vessels lose their ability to expand and contract the way healthy vessels do. They stop being flexible. They stop responding. And when vessels stop responding, circulation stops reaching the places it needs to reach most. The tips of your toes, the soles of your feet, the nerves that run down the back of your calves. That is the damage. And it builds slowly over years, which is why most people don't connect their morning feet problems to something that started happening inside their vessels a decade ago. Now, the habit. Every morning for years, I drank coffee before I ate anything. First thing, before water, before food. Coffee. Most people do this. I did it because I'd always done it. It felt like the right way to start the day, energizing, grounding, a good habit. It wasn't. Here's what research has established about caffeine consumed on an empty stomach in the morning. When you wake up, your body is already in a mild stress state. Cortisol, your primary stress hormone, peaks naturally in the first 30 to 45 minutes after waking. This is normal. It is your body preparing you to face the day. But when you add caffeine to that cortisol peak, something specific happens. Cortisol climbs higher than it would on its own. And cortisol, at elevated levels, does two things that directly affect your legs and feet. First, it signals your liver to release stored glucose into your bloodstream. Before you have eaten a single bite, your blood sugar rises, not from food, from the cortisol response. That glucose floods into blood vessels that are already under stress from overnight dehydration. Second, and this is the part nobody talks about, cortisol is a vasoconstrictor. It tightens blood vessels, specifically the smaller peripheral ones, the ones in your hands, your feet, your lower legs, the ones that are already compromised if your circulation is struggling. So every morning, the first thing I was doing was telling my body to constrict the very vessels I needed to open, then sending a wave of glucose through those constricted vessels, then sitting down and drinking a second cup. I did this for years, and my legs got heavier every year, and I never connected the two. Now I want to tell you about a woman, 77 years old, retired schoolteacher from Ohio. 16 years with elevated blood sugar, both feet burned at night. Her left leg had started going numb during the day, not just when she sat still. She walked slower than she had 5 years earlier, and she knew it. Her doctor had given her medication. The medication was doing what medication does, but her legs were still getting worse. When I looked at her morning routine, the first thing she did every day was coffee, black, before anything else. She'd been told coffee was fine for blood sugar, and in isolation, later in the day, with food, it largely is. But on an empty stomach, first thing in the morning, combined with the natural cortisol peak, she was starting every single day by spiking her glucose and constricting her peripheral vessels before breakfast even hit her stomach. She stopped the morning coffee on an empty stomach. She replaced those first 15 minutes with water, then food first, then coffee if she wanted it after eating. Within 3 weeks, she told me the burning in her feet at night was different, less sharp. Within 2 months, she said her left leg felt warmer during the day. I'm not telling you what happened to her blood sugar numbers. I'm telling you what she told me about how her legs felt, because that's the part that matters to the people watching this. Now let me give you the full picture, because stopping the morning coffee on an empty stomach is the beginning. It removes a blocker. What you do next is what actually opens the vessels back up. There are 3 things that work together. Each one targets a different part of the mechanism, and the reason most people never feel the full benefit is that they do 1 or 2, but miss the third. The first is morning hydration before anything else. 16 to 20 ounces of plain water before coffee, before food, before your phone. Research has established that mild dehydration, the kind your body carries every morning after 8 hours without water, concentrates glucose in the bloodstream and suppresses the very hormones your vessels need to stay flexible. That glass of water is not just about being hydrated. It is changing the chemistry your vessels wake up to. The second is protein before carbohydrates at breakfast. This one has a direct mechanism in the vessel wall story. When you eat protein first, eggs, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, your gut releases a hormone called GLP-1. Research has established that GLP-1 slows glucose entry into your bloodstream, reduces the spike that follows a meal, and protects the vascular lining from the sharp glucose surges that accelerate glycation damage. Same food, different order, different outcome for your vessels. The third is 10 minutes of movement after your largest meal. Not a workout, not a mile, 10 minutes. Walking around the block, walking your living room, it doesn't matter. Research has consistently shown that light movement after eating activates glucose transporters in your muscle tissue that pull sugar out of your bloodstream independently of insulin, independently of your pancreas, independently of your medication. The glucose that would otherwise sit in your vessels after dinner gets cleared. Your overnight baseline drops, and your morning numbers reflect it. These 3 things, water first, protein first, 10 minutes moving, are not separate habits. They are one system. Each one protects a different part of the same pipeline, and stopping the morning coffee on an empty stomach is what removes the daily blocker that was working against all 3. If your feet burn at night, or go numb, or feel cold no matter how many socks you wear, please don't ignore it. I almost did, and I'm 80 years old. For years I told myself it was just age, the tingling, the heaviness in my legs climbing the stairs. But it wasn't age. It was my blood sugar quietly damaging the nerves and the circulation in my legs, and almost nobody warned me in time. If you let it keep going, those little signals turn into something you can't undo. I wasn't willing to lose my feet or my independence. So I started doing one thing every single day to help support healthy blood sugar and protect my legs. I'll show you exactly what in this video. And if you want the simple support I personally use, there's a free presentation linked in the description below. Removing the morning coffee on an empty stomach was the first move, but removing a blocker is not the same as opening a door. It stops the daily damage from compounding. What opens the door is what comes after. There are three things that work together as a system. Each one targets a different part of the same mechanism, and the reason most people never feel the full benefit is that they do one or two but miss the third. The first is morning hydration before anything else. 16 to 20 ounces of plain water before coffee, before food, before your phone. Research has established that mild dehydration, the kind your body carries every morning after 8 hours without water, concentrates glucose in the bloodstream and elevates a hormone called vasopressin that constricts peripheral blood vessels. That glass of water is not just about being hydrated. It is changing the chemical environment your vessels wake up to before anything else has a chance to intervene. The second is protein before carbohydrates at breakfast. When you eat protein first, eggs, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, your gut releases a hormone called GLP-1. Research has established that GLP-1 slows glucose entry into your bloodstream, reduces the spike that follows a meal, and protects the vascular lining from the sharp glucose surges that accelerate glycation damage. Same food, different order, different outcome for the vessels feeding your legs and feet. The third is 10 minutes of movement after your largest meal. Not a workout, 10 minutes. Walking around the block, around your living room, it doesn't matter where. Research has shown that light movement after eating activates glucose transporters in your muscle tissue that pull sugar out of your bloodstream independently of insulin, independently of your pancreas, independently of your medication. The glucose that would otherwise sit in your vessels after dinner gets cleared before the overnight window begins. These three things are not separate habits. They are one system. Water first removes the vasoconstriction of dehydration. Protein first flattens the morning glucose curve before it reaches your vessels. Movement after dinner clears with the meal raised before it does overnight damage. Each one protects a different window of the same 24 hours. And stopping the morning coffee on an empty stomach is what removes the daily blocker that was working against all three. I want to tell you about a woman, 77 years old, retired schoolteacher from Ohio. 16 years with elevated blood sugar, both feet burned at night. Her left leg had started going numb during the day, not just when she sat still. Her doctor had given her medication. The medication was doing what medication does, but her legs were still getting worse. When I looked at her morning routine, the first thing she did every day was coffee, black before anything else. She had been told coffee was fine for blood sugar, and later in the day with food it largely is. But on an empty stomach, first thing in the morning, combined with the natural cortisol peak, she was starting every single day by spiking her glucose and constricting her peripheral vessels before breakfast even reached her stomach. She stopped the morning coffee on an empty stomach. She added the water first, the protein breakfast, the 10-minute walk after dinner. She told me within 3 weeks the burning in her feet at night was different, less sharp. Within 2 months, she said her left leg felt warmer during the day. I'm not telling you what happened to her blood sugar numbers. I'm telling you what she told me about how her legs felt, because that is the part that matters to the people watching this. Think about the people your age who are still moving well, who get up without help, who walk without thinking about it, who carry things and don't have to plan the route around how their feet will feel at the end of it. And look at the ones who aren't. The difference almost never comes down to one dramatic event. It comes down to the small hours, the morning routines that nobody sees, the habits that compound so quietly that by the time the legs start going, nobody connects it back to what started years earlier in the kitchen at 6 in the morning. The circulation problems that show up at 75 started accumulating at 65. The nerve damage that shows up at 80 started with the small vessel stiffening at 70. The mornings add up. That is why what you do in the first hour of the day matters more than most people understand. Not because of one morning, because of what 10 years of the same morning does to the inside of your vessels. You still have mornings left. The question is what you do with them. If you made it this far, you already understand more about your own legs than most people your age ever will. That matters. You know now that the burning, the numbness, the cold feet, that trace back to one thing: blood sugar slowly working against your nerves and circulation. And you know the goal isn't a miracle. It's protecting your ability to stand, to walk, to stay independent. That's why, alongside everything I showed you today, I use a simple daily support to help keep my blood sugar in a healthy range, so my legs keep carrying me where I want to go. I put the free presentation in the description below. Go watch it. And as always, keep working with your doctor. This supports your routine. It doesn't replace it. Everything I've shared today is based on what I've observed in my own body over decades and on the science I've followed closely. It is not personal medical advice. If you are managing diabetes, neuropathy, or any circulation condition with medication, please talk to your doctor before making changes. The habits I described work alongside treatment, not instead of it. And if you are on metformin or any diabetes medication, this system does not replace it. It supports the conditions your medication needs to work in. A vessel that is less constricted, a glucose curve that is less sharp, a morning baseline that starts lower, all of that makes the work your medication is already doing more effective. The burning and numbness in your feet at night, if you are experiencing it, drop yes in the comments and tell me which foot is worse, or if it's both. I read every single comment. Start tonight. Put a glass of water on your nightstand. Tomorrow morning, drink it before anything else, before coffee, before your phone, before food. That one change will not fix everything, but it will stop the first blocker. And that is how you start.